Welcome everyone, aloha, and
Karibu. The reason why I'm greeting you in Kiswahili is because Kiswahili is the second language spoken in the country I'm going to present on.
so welcome to our presentation on conservation or colonization, unpacking NGO influence in Hawaii and Mozambique. So first of all, let's take a look at the map. Where is Hawaii, where is Mozambique located on the map? So Hawaii is this.
Mozambique, I need to go here. So this is the island of Madagascar. This is Africa. Mozambique is the whole, it's long stretch on the west, on the east, southern, on the ocean of the island of Africa. And yeah, it's right here, Mozambique. And we're gonna concentrate on here, these two.
Thank you. And Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands are this little dot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in the middle of nowhere. So the question is, why did we choose these two areas for a case study for Global Challenges Plus? So my connection to Hawaii, I lived in Hawaii for many years. Yeah, and I that's why I chose to study a topic from the Hawaiian area.
Well, I come from Africa. I have never lived in Mozambique, but I traveled throughout southern Africa, closer to Mozambique. And the reason why I chose Mozambique is because what the Mozambique is dealing with is what most of our sub-Saharan Africa, especially in Eastern Africa, have been dealing with.
Yeah, so aloha and Ubuntu, to ground our connection and see how these two areas of the world are connected. In Hawaiian, aloha is a greeting, but it also means love, compassion, and mutual care, rooted in land and community. And this is a picture of the Mauna Kea, which I will talk about on the Big Island. It's actually the highest mountain of the world if we take into account what's under the ocean.
So Ubuntu is a phrase, but it's also a concept of mostly not just the Southern Africa, it's Africa. So it means you are because I am because you are. I cannot exist outside of you, and the you doesn't just stop at human beings, it stops at all the creation, the land, the trees, and everything. So Ubuntu.
Yeah, so what is neocolonialism? Neocolonialism, by definition, is a continuation of colonial power through economics, aid, or NGOs. That's the aspect we're going to focus on today.
So NGOization or the colonization by NGOs in Mozambique, it has many faces. The most important and most crucial phase is that Mozambique is the only country in Africa which does not have a indigenous national language. So the national language is Portuguese. So, sorry, that's okay.
Yeah. So our guiding question for our research was, are NGOs empowering communities or are they rebranding colonialism? And so our method was to study through the stories of narration, manifestation, where we analyze the situation, inspiration, taking inspiration from past and present resistance movements, imagination, imagining that the case if the problem was gone, what would it look like, and application, what are the possible solutions. So first we're going to focus on narration. So just a little bit of the history of Hawaii. So Hawaii was illegally overthrown by the US government in 1893. On the picture you can see that on the day when they prisoned the Hawaiian Queen Liliuokalani into her palace and illegally overthrew the kingdom. So 5 years later an annexation happened without the consent of the indigenous people. And after that, in the 20th century, cultural suppression and land dispossession followed. Today, the struggles for sovereignty, land access, and identity still continue. Oh, so just a little bit of explanation. So, and it especially shows in cases like probably many of you have seen the protest in 2019 by Mauna Kea, the sacred mountain of the Hawaiians. So because it has a beautiful clear view of the sky, they use it for telescopes, and they wanted to install a 30-meter telescope. But this is a sacred land, sacred space for the Hawaiians. Hawaiians look at the land not as a property, but they literally call the land Aina, as their brother. So it was without the acknowledgement of indigenous people. Another example I would like to say, because I lived really close to the Kahuku windmill, so they wanted to install these huge monster turbines, monster windmills in Kahuku, and they chose a neighborhood where mostly indigenous and Polynesian people lived, whereas there would have been a neighborhood appropriate for it, but their rich people lived. Anyway, so there were a lot of protests and many injustices in this regard, but the community fought back. Another great example is the Kukiai Mauna protectors for Mauna Kea, and how Hawaiians do resistance is they do it with kapu aloha, which means it's a non-violent resistance grounded in love and in reverence.
Aluta continua. Samora Machel is the man who led the independence of Mozambique in 1975. But before I get to that, I want to tell you just a little history of Mozambique. Many people think that the history of Mozambique starts when the colonizers, the Portuguese came with the Vasco da Gama. But the story, the history of Mozambique dates in Gama came in, he came in 1489. But the Mozambique, people of Mozambique existed from the third century CE. They are today they are finding artifacts that belongs to that age, mostly in iron. So they have been working. People in Mozambique, they have been working in iron. They are cattle. They kept keeping the cattle. They have been agriculturalists. But when the colonizers came, then everything changed. They erased not only that, the language, the people. They displaced the people so that they can get there. So the man who was educated was going to be somebody. Let's say he was educated in South Africa, so he came back and led the insurgents through his Frelimo movement, and he got the independence of the people. And like most of the heroes of independence in our countries, he was killed.
Yes, that's just a little bit of our history, the history of our places. So manifestation, how does this manifest? How does this violence manifest? In Hawaii, a great example is NGO and science power, which causes an epistemic domination. For example, scientific institutions and NGOs prioritize universal knowledge over indigenous wisdom. And because they say that science is universal, they use it as a justification to stumble all of these indigenous rights and beliefs. So a great example to this is Papahana Umukuakea, which the UNESCO site created it to be protected site, but it was without the full consent of the native Hawaiians, and they buried their ancestors in that land. It's a sacred space for them, but they did not even consult them. Another example I already mentioned is Mauna Kea building the 30-meter tall telescopes. And it also ignored Hawaiian spiritual claims, as it is a sacred mountain for the Hawaiians. So in this, we can see that power is hidden and invisible, and they mask it as neutral science, because they justify that like, oh, learning about the cosmos, what's outside of the earth, and all of these things will be a benefit for humanity, but they disregard indigenous beliefs and indigenous rights and approval when doing that.
For the case of Mozambique, we can sum it up in another very prominent writer and the son of Africa, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He's Kenyan, and what I just learned today is that actually today he has refused to speak English. He's a Kikuyu man, he's writing, he's amazing. He has a lot of writing, so he writes in in Kikuyu right now. But what he said, which summed up what has happened in Mozambique, with the Portuguese coming in and bringing in more settlers, and then going towards Cabo Delgado and Pemba on the ocean, which is where they have timber and they are extracting mines. So he says, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to read this, maybe you read it. So as long as those hidden powers of imperialism, which is the common enemy of mankind, goes unchecked, there will always be exploitation and ever widening gap between the haves and have-nots. And that is what is happening in Mozambique. Some are educated, some are not, and those who are not educated, they don't have a land because they don't have an identity. So this place was not looking like this before. This place looks like a village, and people knew each other. They lived together. But then when the NGOs comes, big money is in there, and they go with the government, they don't go necessarily with the people. So then that starts the issues. So right now the mining is mostly led by a company in Brazil and in China. China is exploiting timber, and the timber they can use it. They can transform it in Mozambique, but they also take this in China. And when they take it to China, this is a rosewood. That's the best of the woods that you can get. I saw a chair that they fabricated and manufactured. It's costing thousands of dollars. But Mozambicans, they are hungry and they don't have no home. Kwame Nkrumah was the first president on the African continent, except Ethiopia, which was not colonized, but he's the first to lead Ghana. And he's quoting another freedom fighter from Algeria, Ben Bella. He said, this invasion, this is the context of Congo. They have just killed Patrice Lumumba, another hero of independence of Congo. So he said, this invasion is strong and clear evidence that the colonial powers will not hesitate to resort to armed forces and aggression in order to maintain their policy of robbing Africa of her natural resources. And that is what is happening right now.
So to sum it up, benevolence is the new mask of colonization. So let's see so people fight back, and there are resistance movements. In Hawaii, it's called Aloha Aina, and it's focusing on legal reclaiming. And with the act in 2022, they established Mauna Kea Stewardship Authority with Native leadership. So the aim is that without approving any scientific sites or NGO work or anything like that on sacred Hawaiian places, they have to be approved by the indigenous authority first. They also continue language revitalization, Olelo Hawaii, because after the annexation, speaking the Hawaiian language was banned in schools in many places. Children and adults got punished for it, and now it's getting revitalized. Also, traditional farming practices, and people learn these in community schools and primary schools as well. My kids learn them in primary schools. So some of the famous leaders and movements in Hawaii, one of them is on the picture is Haunani K. Trusk. She was a scholar and an activist for the Native people. There is also the Puakes and Kahea, some mentionables.
So in Mozambique, people are also waking up. They have a long history. They can't forget what their leaders did. They are waking up and they are saying, we are not passive victims. And they are starting to talk to the NGOs, because context matters. When the NGOs, the big NGOs come into the country and work with whoever is there that they can work with against the people, people start feeling pushed and pushed and pushed until they can wake up. So soon there will be another revolution. Unfortunately, because of the powers and China mostly, which is working with the insurgents, which are mostly in Cabo Delgado, they are reinforcing the harm that the local people are suffering.
So imagination, what would it look like? What would a world like this look like where decolonization is not an issue anymore? In Hawaii, an imagination could contain Hawaii reclaiming their future. Full restoration of land decision making to Kanaka Maoli. Kanaka Maoli means the native Hawaiians. The scientific projects would require permission from the sacred research permits. There would be community managed ahupua models for food sovereignty. So this is important. This is how Hawaiians lived for hundreds of years before the colonizers came in. They worked on the land from the ocean to the mountain, and they respect the land as a family member. And Hawaii was a lot more sustainable at that time. Today, Hawaii wouldn't do without, if shipments would stop for 3 days, Hawaii would hardly survive. And this was a lot more sustainable practice. And some people look at it and they would say like, oh, but that's underdevelopment or undeveloping. But actually it shows that that practice was sustainable. So there could be some creative ideas how to combine indigenous knowledge. Yeah, tourism, just about tourism. Tourism in Hawaii is very exploitative, and it could become regenerative, where people come to Hawaii to get educated and learn about the culture and not just exploit it. Yeah, so land is not property, it is genealogy. That's what the Hawaiians say, because land is their brother.
So let's imagine how Ubuntu would work. How can Ubuntu serve the people? So first of all, it starts with when you go into a place and you are a visitor, how are you showing up? Are you showing up to serve, as NGOs say they are coming to serve, or are you coming to be served? So what we would like to see is the Mozambique going beyond aid dependency, especially in healthcare sector. So it would look like a reparative development, community trust, when you bring the villages together and listen to their plight. So the listening should be the guiding principle of anybody coming to any place. Because if you are not listening, you are imposing your worldview. So, but if you are listening to gain some knowledge, then you would know what the people want. I'm assuming the people of Mozambique would like to have a national language. Because without the national language, Portuguese being blanketly taught, spoken everywhere. But in the villages, the teachers don't speak Portuguese to the level of where they can teach them and help them compete to go to a next level. So that continues to create the haves and have not. So they should develop their own language, and we, as peace builders, we should go into a place with a listening mind.
Yeah, and that goes really along really well with like how do you start an application. First you need to reflect on your own values. Who are you? Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you serving or are you self-serving yourself? How have you been programmed, from hurt or from healing? These are just good questions to ask before thinking about starting any intervention. So, application, what does that look like in Hawaii? Moving beyond symbolic inclusion. Protests are great, protests are useful, and they had results. But it needs to move to policy from protest. The NGOs must shift from partnership to co-leadership. They should not have power over, but they should have power with the people, or the people should have the power and they should be just in a supportive role. This applies to the rights of the indigenous people, free, prior, and informed consent. And as I said before, the Kanaka Maoli, the Native Hawaiians, should uplift science and law.
For Mozambique, it's really easy. A sovereign government which focuses on strong centralized government of unity, the Ubuntu, and the emphasis should be on economic development and social cohesion. Then we don't have time to unpack what social cohesion would look like, but it's a people-centered approach based on collaborative spirit of Ubuntu. This would call all the NGOs, all the stakeholders in the government, transnational agencies and NGOs to think of how can they build capacity for the civil society, because the civil society, most of the time, they live with the people, they know what the people need, but they are not strengthened because all these big NGOs come with big money, and mostly the civil society do not get access to the money.
Yes, so both in Hawaii and Mozambique, it would be land back in practice. So beyond aid dependency, local governance once be restored, donors need to serve, not dictate, community priorities, NGOs could serve as facilitators, not owners, and it should all be based on principles like Ubuntu and land back. Like as on the picture you can see, keep Hawaiian lands in Hawaiian hands. That's a saying because it's a big problem in Hawaii. So these two places are really far away from each other in the world. So what does still connect them? In Hawaii, science and conservation, mass cultural erasure, and in Mozambique, development and extraction displaced communities. But the shared logic is where external authorities override local rights. I'm so sorry, I used a template and I forgot to take these out, so it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with Jupiter, Mars, Venus, or Mercury, but the wording has to do with it. So how do we imagine a decolonial word through connection? So maybe, for example, Hawaiian organizers could visit Mozambique, and they could share strategies for land sovereignty and resistance. Mozambican leaders could travel to Hawaii and exchange ideas on how to hold NGOs accountable. And these exchanges would build a global network of indigenous and local communities. And many of those exist already today. So a shared vision of land justice, mutual learning, and solidarity-based futures could hold a lot of promise.
Well, for me, I don't know all this mercury and stuff, but I would like to learn. So what I see is the research that is done. And the research starts with going to a place. So when you're going to a place with the mindset of not doing harm, then you are held accountable not to do harm. Most of the time what we have seen, the post-colonial theories are not based on the context. So, good thing the Africans are starting to write their research themselves, their methodologies, like Baliga Chilisa, who says exactly that Ubuntu has to be the guiding place because that's the central of their being of all the Africans. If they have to do that, they have to be we have to reflect on what you need to do. And many of these really don't go in there thinking that they're going to cause harm. But things happen, money corrupt, and power corrupt, absolutely, and absolute power corrupts.
So call to action, where do we go from here? What can we do? We can support indigenous-led efforts and funding redistribution. We can demand participatory land governance. And most importantly, we can practice, and we should practice, humility and solidarity in all forms of aid. Because land is life, and we need to listen first before moving on to any kind of help or support. So, yes. Mahalo.
Asante.
Thank you so much for your attention.
Any question? No, no
We're gonna
time?
do Q&A after, so the next group is gonna go. Yeah.
Good, good, good.